The motivation for me making this video was pretty simple. Someone argued that I was being unreasonable in believing that Kislev should afford free armies by turn 18. Well, it is turn 18 as Grand Cathay, as Jan Bo, and I have free armies in Lustria, along with 5 more in Cathay itself. Welcome everyone, Questini here with a discussion about some of the best economies in Total War Warhammer Free Immortal Empires. When I say the best economies, I do mean the best incomes for individual races, but income is not necessarily just a number here at the top. Income can be many things. It can consider things like construction costs or unit recruitment costs, upkeep situation. You might have a race that earns very, very little money, like the Tomb Kings, but because they don't have to spend any of their money on units, they actually end up with a fairly solid income. The Tomb Kings are not going to be on this list for this particular video, because they do certainly have some issues with regards to their income, but at the same time, a race like the Tomb Kings, the Beastmen, and others can work, even though the actual amount of cash that they're earning is not necessarily going to be all that high. So earning a huge amount of cash is not important. It's how you spend that cash in a campaign. It's post-battle loot, it's sacking income, it's construction costs, it's unit recruitment costs, it's upkeep situation. It's also a question of supply lines in a campaign. So at number 5, we do start with the High Elves. I do want to make this quick point. Someone commented, or multiple people commented, on my video of Castalton that I was being silly for complaining about Kislev's poor economy because I was maintaining free armies at level 18 and that's why I was going bankrupt. Well, it is turn 15 in the Tyrian campaign at level at Legendary very hard, and I am maintaining 4 armies over here. Not full ones, though I will certainly get to that point soon enough, but I am paying the supply line cost of 4 armies. The more armies you have, the more the upkeep rises, the more your supply line situation increases. And my economy currently is in the green, and it's likely going to stay that way, especially as I'm getting more economic structures. This is what makes for a good economy, and the High Elves are not even the top of the list. But keep in mind, just because you have a positive number here at the top doesn't necessarily mean anything. You can be completely negative in terms of your income and still have enough money for everything you want in a campaign. Building structures, recruiting armies, even while you're fully in the red. Some races actually excel at that playstyle, and one of the lessons I would give people when playing Warhammer Free, as long as you have money for 1-2 turns at most, you have enough money to survive. Because if you can fight the battle the next turn before you go bankrupt, you have enough money in your campaign. Maybe you don't have enough money for everything, but as long as you're not actually going bankrupt, it doesn't really matter if the number here is green. It doesn't matter what the number here on the left actually is. It matters if you have enough money for the things that you are actually building. And in this case, for instance, even though my actual amount of cash is certainly on the lower side of things, I do have enough money for everything that I actually want to build, including the archers with light armor, the structures. I've already started constructing those. There is nothing here in this campaign that I could use with more money. I could recruit another army with more money, absolutely, but that would be about it. There's no structures I need, no extra units that I need to recruit. I've got 2 full stacks over here, a 3rd going full on recruitment, a 4th smaller stack, not full stack, but one that's about to destroy the Galleon's graveyard, and I have enough money to get through this campaign. And while my economy will soon turn in the red, I've also defeated Astankia, and I'm about to go to war against Marathi, which will also provide a significant amount of income in this campaign. Okay, enough about campaign tactics, but why do the High Elves rank number 5 on this list? Well, here's the reality. The High Elves, when we are looking at their economic potential, the High Elves do have kind of crappy economy early on, but with an immense amount of potential. They generate 100 gold for 1,000 gold that it requires to build the Elven Craftsman. But here's the kicker. You also produce Elven Trinkets, 6 chests. And these are trade resources. So it's, in reality, these Elven Trinkets, if we look at the trade balance, between factions, and we look at the elven trinkets, the value of each elven trinket is 17. You can do the math of that. So it's not just 100 income, like, say, Kislev. It is actually more than that. Assuming you have trading partners, and assuming those trading partners are buying up all those resources. In this particular campaign, looking at the trade screen situation, only half of my elven trinkets are actually being purchased via trade. I am generating only 2,000 money from trade, but that's because there is a currently nasty bug with the high elves ever since they introduced on bow, where you are supposed to get vision whenever you get the trade agreement with the faction. So I should really have vision on, for instance, Bretonnia over there, but I don't at this particular point in the campaign. Vision is actually so very crucial for the high elves that if you're playing a campaign as Imric or Teclis, the fact that you don't have vision on other factions, in particular the ones in Ulthuan, actually limits your campaign potential by a significant amount because your economy ends up being weaker. And that's the reason the high elves are not higher on this list. They do have a huge amount of economic potential. They have 2 gold buildings. They do have the Elven Fairground, which can generate up to 300, and then they have the Promenade, which can generate up to 120. But furthermore, the Promenade is really a control building. So if you get your control to 100 in a province, you're looking at generating 180 from the Promenade, actually going all the way to 360 if you go all the way to tier 5, and 450 for the Elven Fairground. But you do require 100 control, which is actually the downside. The elves do have a great economy, but it is limited by the level of control you have and by the number of trading partners. Furthermore, you do have modifiers, significant modifiers in your economy if you're playing the High Elves. You do have, for instance, the Elven Court, and the Elven Court gives you plus 30% income from entertainment buildings, and then you have the Elven Embassy, which increases the income from ports by 10%, and also increases your income from trade tariffs. Furthermore, you have significant modifiers in other ways as well during the course of your campaign. For instance, a generic prince might have the trait of, say, for instance, efficient, in which case he's reducing the upkeep of archers, spearmen, silveringar, the basic units you want to use in every high elven campaign, by 25%. Tyrion reduces the upkeep of those units by 50%, or a lot of those same units by 50%. And furthermore, he also has a 10% upkeep benefit for all of his armies. That is where the benefits kick in. That's where the High Elves do so great. Their baseline income isn't so great, but when you factor in the modifiers, when you might factor in even potentially some research that can help out, like extra tradable goods or cultural advancements that do help you out during the course of your campaign, or getting Maritime Empire, which gives you access to a vision to all the sea regions of the world, then suddenly the high elf economy becomes really strong. And every lord also has access to the merchant lord skill, which increases tradable resources produced faction-wide by 9%. This is how the high elves generate a lot of money in their campaigns. They're slow going early on, especially if they don't have trading partners, but they do scale up in an incredible fashion. Furthermore, they're post-battle loot, so either gold you get directly after the battle, or post-battle options, or looting and sacking settlements, they also work out pretty decently. It just takes time for the High Elves to reach the heights of some other races who start from the very beginning as being top earners, but the High Elves, they have relatively cheap units if we consider the unit recruitment situation, with archers, 450 for a Archer with light armor, which is a tier 1 unit, but you can use it throughout the entirety of your campaign and it still is effective, or spearmen, only being 430. These are cheap and effective units. You make entire armies of these guys, and they are incredibly effective in a campaign. There are certainly issues with high elves. If you're lacking influence, you're going to have lords that don't have these kind of positive impact and might get a lord that affects your economy in a negative way, like incompetent. So high elves may not start the strongest, but they do have the potential. However, they do have to work for that potential. On a baseline level, I would say that the high elves that start in Ulthuan, so Alariel and Tyrion in particular, Elfarian to a certain extent, and Alefin are in a very strong economic position. Teclis and Imric, not quite as much, because they're isolated. At number 4, it would be Bretonnia. Yes, Bretonnia is one of the richest factions in the game. It may not necessarily seem so from this particular screen, but keep in mind it is turn 18 in this campaign, and I am maintaining 1, 2, 3 free full armies, and a 4th is on its way. I am going bankrupt at a quick pace, but that's more so of an issue of how Bretonnian campaigns are designed as opposed to any particular inherent weakness in Bretonnia's economy. See, Bretonnia has an amazing economy. The problem Bretonnia has is that campaigns like Lewin or Alberic, and to an extent the Fey Enchantress, just suck. Bretonnia as a campaign area in Immortal Empires is fucking atrocious. You've got Alpha Loren, you've got Grom, you've got Kemler. It's not really a great dynamic. Hell, you've got Bellicor, who's very likely to declare war on you if he doesn't declare war on the Elves first. However, Bretonnia does have some very, very substantial economic advantages that very few other races actually do have. In terms of raw economic potential, they can generate one of the highest amounts of income in the entire game. Their landed estate goes all the way to 600. But here's the thing, if you want to build a landed estate, you also need a water wheel, which is also going to increase the income from farms by 50%. So you're not looking at 600. You're looking at 900 from a single building. Sure, you tie it with a modifier. That is ridiculous. And it's the flat highest possible income that you can get from any faction in the game. The highest amount of baseline gold you can get from any faction in the game if you play your cards right. That's kind of where the issues do start kicking in for Bretonnia and where the limiting factors are. But those limiting factors are only limiting factors in the early game. Once you overcome that early game, things, let's just say, become ridiculous. To give you an idea, I have 10 settlements in this campaign. Each of those settlements is generating people towards the peasant economy. The peasant economy is quite crucial. However, once I get water pumps, and this will give me an extra peasant. So my peasant economy will jump from 26 to 36 in an instant once this research is finished in 13 turns. So by turn 31, these armies, which are bankrupting me right now, will cease to be an issue. The more peasants you have working in terms of maintaining your armies, the more peasants you have working on that as opposed to on the field, the worse things are going to be. The more your farms are going to be devastated by the lack of peasantry. You could decide to go for the weaving house if you so desired, but that's not necessarily a great choice either during the course of a campaign, because it does just generally generate less money, but even then you're still looking at 600 income, and it's not quite affected in the same way. You need peasants to work the fields, and this is one of the main limiting factors of Bretonnia, the peasant economy. However, despite the peasant economy, you might be surprised to know that Bretonnia is actually not going to struggle for cash throughout the early game if you play your cards right. That's because Bretonnia has flat out one of the highest, if not the highest, amounts of post-battle loot and sacking income in the entire game. That is not an exaggeration, assuming I can actually see a character with that trait. Lewin may not have it over here. I may have gotten it on someone else. It is likely that I did get it on someone else over here. Trying to find that, because it is considered a negative trait in a campaign. To actually have maybe the secondary army has it. Actually, it might be here that we can see. So you have Luther, and Luther goes all the way into Destroyer, and Destroyer generates plus 50% income from sacking settlements. The sheer amount of money that Bretonnia can earn baseline from sacking settlements, even without this, is incredible. You get Luther, you get Destroyer, you are looking at getting 3,000 from tier 1 settlements. And you're talking here about a faction that can generate almost as much money, or a race that can generate almost just as much money as the Greenskins can in their campaigns from looting and sacking settlements. Convinced yet? It actually gets better for Bretonnia. in the long term. Early game issues are what prevent Bretonnia from being a top tier race and actually earning the #1 spot, because quite frankly, if it wasn't for those early game issues, Bretonnia would be the #1 race on this list. I'm not even exaggerating. So you have a faction that generates the highest amount of gold, far higher than the Greenskins. You have a faction that may generate almost just as much money as they can from looting and sacking settlements. You have a faction that can trade, and then, oh yes, then you have a faction that does not have supply lines. So your supply lines are the peasant economy and the knight vow. So you have this kind of situation where the main limiting factor when we're talking about the Bretonnian economy, the main limiting factors are peasant economies and getting the vows. Like, for instance, here I just kind of screwed up and didn't get it on this particular night. The vows are annoying, the peasant economy is annoying, but if you do get those sorted out, and certainly you will at a certain point in your campaign, once you do get that sorted out, once you do uncover that level of power, and yes, you do lose chivalry when you sack a settlement, you don't care because you're going to be rolling in the damn thing. Once you get that vow sorted out, once you get the army sorted out, once everything is put in order, and hell, over here, one of the issues that I'm actually having is these knights are 1,500 in total, because they're in a lord army that doesn't have that. If I were to sort it out, or if I just disband this particular army over here and sort these knights out by giving them to Lewin, then my economic situation vastly improves. So you do have limitations in a Bretonnian campaign, but you only have those limitations early on. Once you get going as Bretonnia, you flat out have the most money of any faction in the game, any race in the game, to the point that you're competing with the damned Greenskins in raw money. They'll probably earn more from post-battle loot and looting and sacking income because they do get ancillaries that increase that. You will earn more money if you're playing Bretonnia from your direct income, and you'll certainly be competing with the Greenskins in terms of your income, in terms of your income from sacking and looting settlements. In particular, sacking settlements, you'll be earning a lot of money. The problems of Bretonnia are the vows, the limitations on the infantry roster, which is non-existent, and the simple fact that it's kind of annoying. But you don't have supply lines. And so while Bretonnia, as the Fey Enchantress, as Lewin, and as Alberic, does suck to actually play in a campaign, play a campaign as Rapans, who funnily enough, Bretonia's, unlike the High Elves, Bretonnia is the exact opposite. The High Elves need trade to survive. If they don't have it, they're going to struggle. Bretonnia, throw them in the middle of a fucking desert in the middle of nowhere with no natural allies, and they'll be the richest bastards around, and they'll outnumber and outpace their enemies. This is the brilliant thing about Rapans, because she does that. In point of fact, what's really annoying and limiting for Bretonnia as a factor is just Bretonnia itself. The Confederation mechanic is not fun, having to spend so many turns to get things like water pumps. Like, if we had baseline water pumps, Bretonnia would be an S-tier faction. I'm not joking. That's how freaking ridiculous this faction is, even at this point. Just have that miserable early game, but once you get going as Bretonnia, you get going and you outpace the vast majority of other factions in the game, and only one or two races are better in terms of the late game economy than Bretonnia is. Many races can and will beat Bretonnia in the early game, but none, except a very, very select few, will be able to pump out as many armies as cheaply and as powerful as Bretonnia can. Because these peasants are cheap. These knights, when you have proper upkeep, they're not really that expensive, and you're generating trucks of money. My recommendation, get the mod that gives auto-completion of vows at a certain level, so you don't have to deal with the limitation of your knights, for instance. That would be it. Maybe there was a peasant economy mod, or you could just play the Fey Enchantress if you so desire, or just screw all of that and play the only Bretonnia campaign that's actually worth a damn in Immortal Empires, and that is, of course, Rapans. I'm not joking. I deliberately chose campaigns for this video where the Legendary Lord was either a detriment or a non-factor, but let me be clear on this. If you play Rapans as opposed to the garbage that is Lewin, Leoncourt, I would be rolling in money right now as Rapans. That's how big of a difference the Legendary Lord can make in a campaign like this. In third position is Grand Cathay. The motivation for me making this video was pretty simple. Someone argued that I was being unreasonable in believing that Kislev should afford free armies by turn 18. Well, it is turn 18 as Grand Cathay as Jan Bo, and I have free armies in Lustria, along with 5 more in Cathay itself. Not full stacks, but I have 5 full stacks, 100 units in these armies, and I'm paying the supply line cost of those armies. I have in total around 120 units by turn 18. As Cathay, you don't ask yourself what you should recruit. The only question you ask yourself as Cathay is when you stop recruiting, because you should never stop recruiting as Cathay. You should constantly recruit as Cathay, never at one point in your campaign, regardless of who you're playing as, either Miao Ying, Xiao Ming, or Yan Bo. Never at any point should you stop recruiting. Now you might think that over here I'm abusing Yan Bo's campaign power. In reality, his early game, these first 18 turns, are actually a huge detriment to play as him, because while Yan Bo is certainly very strong once you get commercial districts at tier 3, he does have that dual start, which is a significant pain to deal with early on in a campaign, but it's going to give him much more power later on. So all of these resources that I have had to devote on 2 different fronts to deal with Mazda Mundi, Snitch, and others have been a significant drain on my resources. But what makes Cathay absurd? Because you might think, oh, it's caravans generating resources in the campaign. To be sure, caravans do provide a nice solid boost of income, 5,000 every 8 turns or so, however long it takes a caravan to get there. Effectively, a caravan might be generating something like 600, 700 gold a turn during those turns when it's moving over there at the end of it. That is a nice solid boost of income and something that shouldn't be ignored. But that's not it. Is it the fact that Cathay has good economic structures? To some extent. They do have the trade exchange, which generates 325 income for about 1,500 gold cost, which you can obviously improve during the course of campaign. But it's not that either. Is it the fact that Cathay has economic modifiers through things like the Contemplation Gardens? To an extent, absolutely. It is modifiers, but not building modifiers. Harmony modifiers. So let me walk you through the rabbit hole that is Cathay's perfect harmony, balanced harmony in a campaign. I love that when people complain about yin, extreme yin or yang, which by the way required significant sacrifices to achieve in a campaign and cost you a significant amount of resources and slowed you down in certain ways. I like that when people complain about these being too powerful, when the most powerful when Creative Assembly reworked the harmony system was the balanced harmony. Let's consider what it gives. 20% campaign movement range, not relevant for this video, but it does allow your armies to move faster in a province, allowing you to capture territory more quickly. And that is money. Time is money. Always remember that. Time is money. You should be fighting a battle every turn. You should be taking a settlement every single turn. You should be conquering every single turn, fighting a battle. If you can do so, you can maintain your economy. You can have an economy completely in the red, and it will not matter as long as you're capturing territory in a single turn. Here, I have gone over that, actually. I have captured 26 settlements in this campaign, and while I did manage to confederate 2 minor Cathayan factions, the vast majority of these settlements I capture. So, on average, I have captured more than 1 settlement in every single turn of this campaign, and that should be the norm of a campaign. But really, it's not that. Every army in a province with perfect harmony, you should only move in a province when you can reach a settlement, is going to have minus 25% upkeep. Keep in mind, with the supply lines that I have at 8 armies, I only have 28% upkeep. You are required to get higher than 6 armies in a campaign in order to even trigger supply lines having any actual impact in a Cathayan campaign. Doesn't matter who you're playing on. You can be playing Miao Ying, who is the worst. You can play Xiao Ming. You can play Yan Bo, who has the most long-term potential, but annoying early game. It is not relevant to you decide to play. What is relevant is that you maintain this balanced harmony for that minus 25% upkeep. This is absurd. Like, every faction to some extent that has to deal with some limitation in their campaign, either because of supply lines directly or because of the fact that they have some mechanic, either unit capacity or peasant economy or not vows, that do limit their army. Cathay does not care. The fact that you can nullify the upkeep increase of up to 6 armies in a campaign just by having balanced harmony alone in every single province is absurd. And while certainly it will never be quite perfect, you should consider the fact that you get like free 5 armies, essentially with no supply lines whatsoever in your campaign, and only then does it start increasing. And it will start, and it's going to be increasing by just as much as it does for everyone else. But for everyone else, 28% army upkeep at turn 18 is actually a significant problem. Furthermore, Cathay also, with perfect harmony, generates 15% more income in every province that has it. And then there is the Whooshing Compass, which generates an additional 15% income in Cathay-owned regions. So you're looking at a race that has a significant upkeep benefit, low cost of structures, high growth, economic modifiers, and an ignorance of supply lines, and that 30% income benefit. That is absurdly strong. To go even further down this rabbit hole of how Cathay is absurd as a race, you also have the new Lord Magistrates, which were buffed because they were useless. They are still useless, but they have one very significant level of power. They have supply line operations, which reduces upkeep by an additional 15%. So you are looking at certain armies ignoring 40% of the upkeep you may have in a campaign. That is the same kind of level of upkeep benefits that Skarsnik gets for goblins, and only for goblins. You get it for all the armies led by Lord Magistrates. 25% is something that extremely powerful factions have only for some very select units. Cathay has a flat-out faction-wide. That is why Cathay is in the number 3rd position on this list. The money that they generate may not necessarily seem so high, but they do have a good amount of post-battle loot, they do have a good amount of growth, they do have a decent level of income, but it is those modifiers that make them so damned absurd. And also they have a good amount, like the post-battle loot and sacking and looting income is also great. But it's all about the modifiers. Cathay is kind of similar to the High Elves, but whereas the High Elves rely on trade to get ahead and control, you rely on just getting balanced harmony, which may require you to simply not build certain buildings in a province and make some sacrifices to maintain that balanced harmony. That is all. It is not difficult achieving balanced harmony, and never was. It was just always annoying as a system, and I am annoyed that Creative Assembly decided to listen to people who don't know any better and fix the system that they already fixed in a very good way in patch 4.0. But regardless of that, Cathay is a powerhouse. The only main limiting factor in their campaign is the climate situation, but like their armies, consider this, their armies are made up of Jade Warriors or Tier 1, which are cheap and effective and powerful melee units. Some of the strongest some of the strongest melee units in terms of pure raw survival in the early game. The best Tier 1 melee unit in the entire game, actually. At Tier 2, they get Jade Warrior Crossbowmen, which are also very good. I mean, consider this. Cathay is an army of dwarves that is 10 times better than the actual dwarves in the game. That's what they are. None of the weaknesses, all of the benefits of the dwarven army, all in one. They don't quite have the same power in terms of armor piercing, but it doesn't matter. Because when you can maintain 8 freaking armies in your campaign by turn 30, and make no mistake, I'll be going towards 10 plus armies by turn 30, then that is a biblical level of power that very few factions can match up to. Cathay brings the men. No one can stand in their path. In fact, this is actually what makes a unified Cathay an absolute nightmare to invade, because if you think I'm being ridiculous, I want to point out that Xiao Ming over here has 3 full stacks over here under control of the AI. He's got a 4th under construction, and then he might soon get a 5th. And there's some limitations on how many armies that the AI can control. Miao Ying, who literally only has 2 provinces, has 4 full stacks of troops over here. So this is not just even the player being absurd, this is the AI being absurd. And by the way, there seems to be some hard limitation on the number of armies the AI can recruit in a campaign. You outnumber the AI, any AI. You outnumber the Skaven in a campaign map. You have a better economy in the Skaven, and you have more units potentially than the Skaven. That is crazy to think about. In second place, it is the Greenskins, and in this case, I am using Warzag as the most neutral legendary lord of the Greenskins to showcase the absurdity of this particular race. Because the Greenskins are absurd as a race. Like, look at this campaign. It's turn 13. I have 4 armies over here, and while I am going in the red, the Greenskins do not care about that. In fact, this is the thing to understand about the Greenskins, and about certain other races as well. You may play your entire campaign in the red, but it doesn't matter. The Greenskins may not necessarily have the best income of the world, but they get so much post-battle loot from the very beginning of the campaign, and they are not limited by the peasant economy, that they achieve an enormous amount early on in campaign. Furthermore, their units are rather cheap to recruit at the very least, with things like goblin archers and nasty skulkers early on in the campaign really pulling their weight in a very substantial fashion. More expensive stuff later on will certainly take its toll, but early on you end up dominating. Furthermore, Greenskin structures are incredibly cheap. 250 for a pile of shiny stuff that gives you 250, 500 for the heap of shiny stuff. These are paying for each other in either 1 or 2 turns, or yeah, just 2 turns at most. This is rather exceptional for an economic building in a campaign. Furthermore, the Greenskins, while they cannot trade and may not necessarily have the best background income, because yes, pile of shiny stuff seems great until you realize that that is not the main economic driver. You could play an entire campaign as the Greenskins and not bother with a single pile of shiny stuff or the Horde, and you'd still be rich beyond measure. The reason is that raiding stashes exist, and every single raiding stash, like Greenskins start strong, and what they do end up achieving in the late game is absurd. They have the raiding stashes, which each of them increases sacking and looting income from all, for all characters. This stacks. Furthermore, there are ancillaries on lords and heroes that do increase the post-battle loot and income from looting settlements or sacking settlements even further. So the Greenskins are an absurd race that is very, very strong, that very few other races can actually compare to. That is not even a discussion, really, as far as I see it. Like, Greenskins just earn a lot of money. And then you consider things like research, things like Grimgor or Azag or Grom, and the huge benefits they get in their campaigns when it comes to this, you end up with an absurd level. How absurd, you might ask? Well, imagine sacking a settlement at like turn 40 or so and earning like 20k, 30k gold, depending on which faction you're talking about. Imagine having one of the highest growth rates in the game with attached to one of the lowest building costs in the game as well. Imagine never having to deal with rebellions. I mean, Bretonnia has the control and growth benefit, but the Greenskins are just better at it because they don't have to deal with the peasant economy or vows. But yeah, Bretonnia is kind of like the Greenskins actually in a lot of ways. They generate a lot of money passively without trade, though they can trade. They also end up just generating a lot of money from sacking and looting. Bretonnia can end up being better than the Greenskins, but by that point the Greenskins have conquered half the map, whereas Bretonnia may not expand beyond its initial borders. That is the power of the Green Tide. Like, give me 10 more turns and everything that you see around here, with exception of like the border princes, but the entirety of the Badlands and the mountains would be under my control in 10 more turns. That is not an exaggeration, that is simply a statement of fact. Because, like, I am just going to keep recruiting and getting more and more units. and I will never run out of gold. It doesn't matter if my income is minus 10,000 over here, as long as I can fight 1 or 2 battles and replenish all of the money that I spend. The Greenskins have so much money in a campaign that even though you might be spending it on every single thing that you want, even if you are literally recruiting armies every single turn of your campaign, is impossible to run out of money. In point of fact, when we're talking about the Greenskin campaign, the level of absurdity is so high in their campaigns that the more armies you get, the more sacking you can do, the less you're likely to run out of resources in a campaign. And once you get the masses of heroes, which Greenskins do have, and casualty replenishment, you are the Green Tide. You are unstoppable. And that is why Greenskins are number 2 on this list. May not have the best values in terms of raw money that they're earning at the top meter, but when you're considering the post-battle loot, occupying and looting settlements or sacking settlements and rebuilding them from scratch, because they're very cheap to do as the Greenskins, with a high level of growth and a high level of control, similar to Bretonnia, actually. Bretonnia, in point of fact, has higher baseline growth, so they use the same tactics. Funnily enough, Bretonnia plays very similarly like the Greenskins from that perspective. Yeah, races are very unique in a campaign. I mean, they are, but it's still kind of hilarious to think of like Bretonnia and Greenskins sharing anything in common in a campaign. But number 2, Greenskins. And finally, at number 1, it would be the Dark Elves as a race. Though probably not Hellebron. I used Hellebron because she's actually the least ridiculous out of all of them. If you think she's absurd, you should see what Marafi can get up to in a campaign, because it is significantly stronger. Because Marafi is significantly stronger than Hellebron in her early game. But the Dark Elves are crazy with regards to their income. They're crazy from multiple perspectives. They do use slaves to generate income, but slaves are so plentiful in a campaign that you really will not care about having enough slaves. In point of fact, what you'll do with slaves is, more often than not, you will literally sell them for money. Yes, the Dark Elves as a race have a mechanic that only Grom has for the Greenskins. You take slaves, you care about getting slaves from post-battle loot, and then you use those slaves to generate more and more money in your campaign. And then you might be spending some of those slaves to get some instant construction done in your campaign. Growth, that's cute. What is growth in a Dark Elven campaign? It's a nice word. The sheer level of power that these guys have is completely out of this world. While the income itself doesn't go to the same extreme lengths that the Bretonian income goes through, and the Dark Elves do have supply lines, it can still generate 700 income for 1,500 gold, as long as they have slaves coming in. But that's only part of the equation. Add in the ability to literally print money and one of the highest amounts of post-battle loot and looting and income from looting and sacking settlements, you get the race with a biblical level of money. I might be spending a lot of money in this particular turn, but I am certainly not running out anytime soon. All I need is a battle, and I'm just setting myself up to fight free next turn. Yeah, I ain't running out of money in this campaign, suffice to say, like at any point during this campaign. In fact, I am going to have more money once I fight those battles than I actually had this turn. This is the absurdity of the Dark Elves. Like, it's absurd because unlike Cathay, who can maintain a lot of armies due to the perfect harmony situation, the Dark Elves just literally maintain a lot of armies and do not care about it. And these armies, they're not cheap. We're talking here about armies that are costing 4K a pop, and you still do not care. And it goes even crazier because you can buff the income that these armies generate for post-battle loot with the sake of black arcs. And you can put armies on these black arcs to reduce their upkeep by 50%. So you turn a 4K army into a 2K army, and you can attack across the oceans with it. Do I need to say anything more about the sheer ludicrous nature of the Dark Elves? I think there's enough that has been said on this subject. It is one of the most mind-boggling things that anyone came out when Warhammer 3 came out as a game to suggest this race was bad. It is not. While late game potential was certainly higher in Warhammer 2 versus Warhammer 3. The early game potential of this race is biblical. And furthermore, the Dark Elves have such an incredible climate potential dependent on the Legendary Lord you're playing. Like all of Wolf 1, all of Nagrand, all of the Chaos Wastes as freaking Helebron, that you just do not care at all. The sheer level of expansion possibilities in a campaign like this are immeasurable. The sheer amount of money you're going to make from every single battle is immeasurable. The sheer amount of money you'll literally print out of thin air every single turn once you get enough slaves is ridiculous. This is crazy. Like, crazy enough that in this campaign I annihilated Be'lakor, Valkia, and Sigvald easily. Crazy enough that I'm invading Wolfwad with secondary and tertiary armies while Helebron is just going up to beat up Grombrindel on her own because she's just that powerful. Crazy enough that I'm waging a multi-stage, multi-front war across the entirety of Nagrand and Ulfwan, and I do not care. And even if I lose any of these armies, it does not matter. Oh, I lost one of these armies. Well, I'll send 10 more in a couple of turns. This is what makes the Dark Elves absurd. Like, not just even a powerful race with a powerful economy. No, they are completely out of this freaking world. Now, you may ask about the Castors and why they're not on this list. Castors are a great race. They're an S-tier race, but they don't really have the best amount of income. Not gold, anyway. It's more about the careful balancing act when you're playing a Castorf campaign. The Dark Elves just steamroll everyone that stands in their path, and no one, and I mean no one, can stop them. Like, again, Sigvald, Valkia, and Be'lakor. I think you know how powerful, anyone knows how powerful those Legendary Lords are, and Helebron is considered one of the weaker of the Legendary Lords of the Dark Elves. Yeah, let's just say it gets absurd when you think about, like, this is the thing about income. Income is power. Significant faction power. It's armies on the field to overwhelm your opponents. So I had such a ridiculous campaign at one point with Marathi that I conquered all of Wolfwan, and she never stepped foot in it. Yes, I literally sent Black Arcs and land invasions into Wolfwan against Tyrion, Alarion, and Alfarian, and I won. That was mind-boggling when I first did it. It's still mind-boggling to an extent. But some people want to argue to me that, oh, you know, Kislev is fine. This is what Kislev is competing against. There's no competition. Like, there are races like this, then there's Nurgle, Kislev, and the Empire. And I think we all know who is the better choice over here. Costin signing out.